like as a parent, being active and doing stuff, I think is such a cool way to inspire your kid too, without directly pushing, sports and physical fitness.
Yeah. And especially with sports and physical fitness, I do think, and I've seen this done improperly before, like if you're going to push your kid, like, yeah, do it through leading by example, stay in great physical shape yourself. Like Enoch talked about this in his podcast. Like he'll do the sprints with the guys.
Yeah. Lead
Like
from the
you
front.
asking your kid to go to 6 a.m. wrestling practices, or you want them to, go with them. Like at least be there. Welcome to Iron Summit, the podcast where we dive deep into the art and science of becoming your best self, blending expert insights on strength training, smart recovery, optimal nutrition, and mindset mastery to help you elevate your game. Iron Summit is brought to you by Bridge Athletic. Looking for a way to streamline your training programs and deliver exceptional results? Check out our friends at Bridge Athletic. Their platform is packed with over 300 templates and 1,500 instructional videos, courtesy of subject matter experts like Exos, FMS, and Hyperice, making program design both efficient and impactful. Our listeners can take advantage of an exclusive offer. For a limited time, get your first 30 days free and your next month at 50% off when you use code IRONSUMMIT, all caps. That's code IRONSUMMIT, no spaces, all caps, for 30 days free plus 50% off your second month at bridgeathletic.com. Check it out and start assigning custom programs directly to your athlete's mobile device.
We're live.
We're live.
Max, that is sweet. You're in the home gyms, getting better and better every day.
Little micro gym. Yeah,
Micro
this is a cool
gym.
background.
Most people call it a home gym, but you call it a micro gym because you got a normal gym.
That's so cocky.
I said it, not you.
But like compared to your little setup, this thing is tiny. This is like 8 feet by 8 feet.
Dude, I don't think mine's much bigger than that. I'm just using 2 different rooms.
That's a home gym. You got multiple rooms in your home gym. You got a leg room and a compound in the room.
If we didn't live in Colorado, it would have been so much nicer to do it in the garage where you don't have to haul all this stuff downstairs. 2, you just have like a little more space because you can always open the garage. But with this cold weather, it's been nice that it's warm enough to like actually work out there instead of freezing, grabbing like a cold stainless steel bar.
You would have had to install a heater in your garage.
I feel like that's soft,
that's a
dude.
whole expense. That's soft.
Yeah.
In Colorado, that's just like surviving.
Survival. I can't believe you drilled into the cement, dude.
Yeah, that was a process. There's a
nuts.
process, and then there's rebar in that. Yeah. So like a couple times I drilled and was just like, nope, I gotta move that and try again. That's why they like a little random in their place.
I got to tell you a story about I was drilling into, so we had to change license plates. We had to register cars, out here versus California. Yep. And the old license plate, the screw was like rusted in. And so I'm like, dude, I'm forcing this thing with drills, like screwdrivers, just trying to get it off. And I stripped the threading on the screw. So then I got like, I sound like an idiot, but like I had like a torque drill or whatever. I got one of them out. The second one, I still couldn't get out. It was so stuck. So I grabbed a pair of pliers and I cracked it. I got it off, snapped the screw head off. So now it's sticking out this much. I still can't get it out. So I'm like trying to do it with pliers, still like it's not working. There's not enough of a lip. So we drilled into it to pull it out. It's so rusted. I drilled a hole all the way through it, which was also an issue because we had to like sand it down to be flat to drill into it. Otherwise we were just drilling into the car. So it's drilled through the hole. The thing still won't come out. So then we got to we open up the trunk, take out the back paneling on the trunk so I can get to behind it. I took pliers and I just ripped out the back of the screw, and I still had pieces of the screw in there, and finally cleaned it all up with pliers. Finally got it to work. And then I lost the other license plate. I don't know where it went. Like I screwed on the front ones. Chloe had the other one. So now we have to go get a new license plate.
Well, did you already put the stickers on the back one?
That's what I'm saying. We lost that one. So
Oh,
because
so you lost the important one.
this started, I have the front one. I unscrewed. Everything was fine on the front one. I screw that in. Chloe's like, I can't get this off. So I go through this whole thing. And then I'm like, all right, give me the back plate. She doesn't know where it's at. I don't know where it's at. And so now we're like blaming each other. Like, where'd you put it? I'm like, I didn't have it. Where'd you put it? So I think it accidentally got thrown away or something because this was over the course of a couple of days. I'm like, how do you lose a license plate?
Yeah, well, that's this has been the license plate from hell for you guys.
Dude, I'm like, freaking the amount of like just wasted time on this stupid registration.
It's
I'm like, all
something
right.
that's so easy. You know what? Maybe I'm admitting to a crime here, but I don't do a front license plate.
Well, I heard that's not a big deal.
It's a non-moving violation,
Yeah, it's
and
like a
only
$25 fine.
one time ever, I got pulled over. I was like, I wasn't speeding. I wasn't, which is rare for me, but I wasn't speeding. And I was like, what the heck is going on? Two officers came up to my car. I was like, oh boy, I don't know what. And he's like, you don't have a front license plate. It's like, nope. He's like, that, that's technically not allowed. And I was like, yeah. And then he was like, this is Officer So and so. He's in training. We just were doing like a practice pull up. So that's the only time I've ever been spoken to about it. Like I've got speeding tickets and the officer says nothing about my lack of front
So
license plate.
I told this whole story to my dad, and he goes, technically it's not a big deal. If you just put the back one on, um, he's like, most cops got to be like kind of just having a bad day to pull you over for it. Like they won't pull you over for that. And it's like a $25 fine. And I'm like, that sounds great, Dad. I lost the one with the sticker. Like I
Yeah,
need,
you need the sticker now.
so,
Oh
but
man.
yeah,
So are you
that's
driving around
funny.
without a license plate right now?
No, so the old plates are good till February. So that was the one thing we did right, getting in front of this. So we got time. But I'm like, it's probably going to be another $200 or whatever to get a new one and re-register. I'm like, just unnecessary BS. But yeah, it was kind of, it was so crazy that it's just like kind of funny at this point. I'm like, wow,
It is. That's
this
like
is bad.
usually not what you would think you have to spend a lot of time on switching license plates.
Dude. And then the other thing, I went to like Lowe's to get new screws to screw it in. And the first time I did it, like they had like a pegboard on the wall. I screwed it in. I'm like, oh, this is perfect. This one fits. Take it home. It's a little too big. And the screws were metric screws, not the US measurements. So it was like the slightest difference. And so I had to go back and go grab a whole difference. I'm like,
You
spent
got to
way
go
too
buy
much time.
European screws.
So
That's
yeah,
funny.
it was good. Anyways, Max, how are you doing? How's the dad life?
We're good over here. Got watched our first wrestling meet last night with Reese.
How'd you
Made her
like it?
watch Okie State versus Northern Iowa.
And that's a
She was
good
into it.
that's a good first duel to watch.
It was a good duel. It was very entertaining. A lot of good matches. But
Did I? Who was that jumped up? He was like he got slammed and then he like
oh, sir, that was at 197. Kid lifted him and he just went with it. He's like, I'm
dude
gonna
it,
do a front flip.
and he like rolled over. Yeah, that was crazy. I
That was
saw
a
that.
good. Did you watch that match or just
I
highlights?
I just saw a clip of that and I was like, dude, this dude wants to break his neck.
Yeah, that's the kind of way that kid wrestles. He just is funky.
Yeah, that's nuts. Um, speaking of wrestling, I wanted to ask you what would you do? I think I get this question a lot. I'm sure you do with coaching wrestling too. Is like, how do you make your kids be good at sports and how do you support them as a parent? Because I think there's a lot of different philosophies and I don't know, you always know the overbearing parents, but then there's also the parents that, parents always want, I think it comes from a good place. Most parents, like they're doing it out of love, but they do it the wrong way. How do you think about, I mean, especially now that you got a kid, but putting your kid in sports and how you support them without being overbearing or
Yeah.
hurting the
Well, I think
relationship?
there's two levels to this, and in your and I case, we're gonna have to worry about both of them. So there's like, how do you get your kids into sports, and then there's how do you coach your kids. Which if our kids are gonna wrestle, both of us are probably gonna want to be involved in coaching in some capacity. But I think there's really two levels, and we'll start with like, how do you get your kids into sports? That's a different story, and I think for wrestling in particular, there's a fine line with it. I think you can start a kid early to get the mat time. I think actually wrestling or mat sports in general, I didn't wrestle until eighth, ninth grades, but I was doing judo from very, very early age. But I think mat sports are great for kids like proprioceptively just because they're so dynamic. You got to be very aware of your body in a lot of positions. It's a little bit like gymnastics, um, which I maybe even put my kids in first because wrestling is like gymnastics, but you're like fighting someone else at the same time. Whereas gymnastics, you can just like roll around and tumble for the first couple of years, which is going to teach you like most of what you're learning in wrestling for the first couple of years you're learning it.
You got to be careful
So
with gymnastics, though, dude. That goes from 0 to 100 so quick.
for sure, I'm not saying like keep your kids in gymnastics. I'm just
I
like,
know,
if
like,
you want to develop a good wrestler, maybe put them in gymnastics at like 2 or 3, like have them tumble, learn their
yeah,
body.
that's
Then
good.
you
I
can
know
go.
like 6 to 8 year olds that are like, I mean, they're like 3 hour practices. I'm like, how do you get these kids to do this every single day for three
No, it's
hours?
like super intense. And like your peak for gymnastics is incredibly young, especially for girls.
Unless you're
Guys too, I
Simone
like
Biles.
you peak at like 16 to 20
Yeah,
years old in that
that's
sport.
crazy. That's
Because
crazy.
it's like a pure like strength to weight ratio
Dude,
kind of
kind of
deal.
sidebar, sorry to keep pulling this thread, but what do you like? Gymnastics is such a mental sport. It's kind of insane. Like you could train your whole life for it. Like something like wrestling, you mess up, like sucks, but you can continue to, as long as you don't get pinned, like you can come back from a deficit. Like you could train your whole life, and then in your 2 minute routine, your foot slips off the beam and you fall and you totally lose it because of like
It's so hard.
one mess up. It's
Yeah, I
such
don't
a,
know. It's a
yeah.
very mental sport. Actually, my favorite sports psychology book ever is written by a gymnast,
Hmm.
Way of the Peaceful Warrior, which I think applies incredibly well to wrestling.
Yeah.
Maybe
Huh.
we'll make that the first tip. If you are going to have a kid and put them in wrestling or gymnastics, any intense, especially individual sport, uh, read Way of the Peaceful Warrior first.
I don't think I've ever read that. I'll have to grab it.
It's awesome. This to summarize, it's basically you need to focus on the journey and not the outcome. Is really the short summary. There's a lot more to it than that, but I think that's like really important, and that's a very important topic with starting your kids in sport because you need to be able to enjoy what you're doing. And like wrestling is fun. It's hard, but it's supposed to be fun. We're supposed to have fun doing it, especially as a young kid. You need to be having fun doing it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to burn out. And we were talking about this the other day, Ryan. Like, you don't have that long of really hard wrestling before you start to burn out mentally and physically.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so true.
What do you think?
I don't know, man. I thought about this a lot. Um, Not because like I'm also an idiot. I don't have kids. I don't know, but this just seen a lot of kids and a lot of parent relationships with kids. Um, and I think the first thing is I think there's general guidelines to like putting your kids in sports and making sure that they're successful and learning the life lessons, regardless of them taking it seriously and trying to be the best athlete they can be. And then like it ramps up eventually. But I think the first step is like, you got to know your kid, got to know what your kid's about. Like the Russian or like training system of throw them in it when they're 4 and just crush them. And then the cream rises to the top like that. I don't think that's like the best cookie cutter approach. Like you're going to get some crazy athletes out of it because the ones who survive do well. Um, but I think the better way to do that probably is like have a pulse on what your kids like, what they enjoy, how they're feeling about stuff. Keep it fun. I'm a big fan of like have them try a lot of sports. Don't just throw them into one sport and make it the whole thing all the
Yeah,
time. Um, but I think it's just such a great vehicle for like controlled struggle and life lessons that even if they don't like end up being elite athletes, like they're gonna learn a lot from it. And then once they get older and they like come to you and push and what like that's when you continue to provide for
that's
them and
when
help them.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but I do think it's important to probably seek out some good coaches because even like especially like specifically for us, like a wrestling example, I don't know that I'd want to be like my kid's main coach. It's like I'd rather them work with another coach, and then like I'll help out when they have questions or when they're at home. But I want it to be like a separation between like family and sport a little bit. And then that line obviously crosses, but not like you're always in sport mode, you know?
Yeah. I think if you're going to coach your kids, it's important for them to have other coaches. With you, I think that'll be interesting because and I know Ryan, he hates compliments, but Ryan's one of the better wrestlers, yeah, that in the country in the last 10 years. And there's not many coaches like you. So like, it's going to be hard to find coaching that you're like, I don't know. I'd be interesting to watch you balance that. Like, you're going to be like, I know better than that coach, but I'm going to let him coach like
I think though, and maybe this is a hot take, but I think especially at a young age, you drill in fundamentals. Everybody knows how to coach
this
it.
is true up until until a certain level. But we just
Yeah,
talked to like Reese, right? And his son's starting to get pretty good. And
yeah.
Reese is another guy. Like Reese is better than most at wrestling. He's
I think
starting to coach his son.
yeah. I think that's a special case though, because his kid is around wrestling 24/7. So just by like hanging out with his dad, he's going to be around high level wrestling all the time because his dad coaches at a college and coaches with senior level athletes. So, like you're always going to care as a parent and do that, but like that kid's going to absorb a lot. And the kid's kind of getting to that age where it's like, you can take this seriously. And it sounds like he really wants to. And so Reese is supporting that. But again, I mean, if your kid is like really pushing and wanting your help, I think 100% step in and continue to push and help.
If they're asking for it, they got to want to do it themselves. I 100% agree. And I heard someone say this to me. I can't remember who it was. It was like wrestling is way too hard of a sport to be doing it for your parents, to be doing it for your dad.
100%.
Way too hard. You got to be doing it for yourself.
Yeah.
And that's something I'll give my dad credit, who did coach me. He never pushed me once to be a part of judo wrestling. It was always my decision. I remember I played lacrosse. I played one team sport for 1 year in my entire life.
That's crazy, dude.
I played lacrosse my 8th grade year. I loved it. I played goalie. I was like, had some talent at it. I probably could have like gone to play lacrosse, gone on to like take it seriously. But I remember we sat like, cause I really enjoyed it. My dad was like, all right, what do you want? Do you want to keep going with judo and wrestling? Or do you want to play lacrosse? Cause we're getting into high school here and you might be able to do both your freshman year, but like you're going to have to, especially if you have aspirations in one of them, you're going to have to kind of like pick it and stick to it. And if it's lacrosse, like you better do it now because you're early, like you've only done it 1 year. You've got some talent, but like you got to do it. And he left it. He was my choice. It's like lacrosse.
That's cool.
And I made the right decision and decided to stay in judo wrestling.
Young Max was wise.
Yeah. Yeah. I just chose the tougher of the sports. I'm just kidding. Lacrosse players. Not really.
I love lacrosse, dude. It's
a cool sport. We'll have a great lacrosse player on soon who did both at a high level, so we can talk to him about.
I cannot wait.
Lacrosse.
That's gonna be a fun one.
But yeah, I think like that, having that left up to me was a really like that. It was never not my choice.
Yeah,
my dad did a great job in coaching me, and I would say he was my main coach through senior year in high school. He wasn't the head coach at the wrestling team, so there was great. That was great, and then he was my main coach. But the other thing my dad did really well, and I think this is to your point, Brad, is he brought in high-level wrestlers for me to work out with. So it wasn't like he would coach me, but then I was also getting feedback from the guys I was wrestling with, which at the time was like I went to with Tommy Klum. I wrestled with the Flahertys, who were Division I wrestlers, Jesse Jansen. I always had like someone who was really tough around that my dad didn't have to be my only coach.
Yeah. I think that's smart, man. And that's a good point too. Like I think one of the biggest things kids get out of summer camps, like when you go to a summer camp and there's like a college wrestler or somebody that this kid's looking up to, it's like the inspiration factor of like, you show your kids some videos of this guy and then they go do the camp. they're probably not going to retain anything at 8 years old from an actual wrestling camp, but hopefully they're like, get more into that sport. And if they learn a cool, drop step or something, like that's sweet. But I got a teammate in college, and I mean, he's in college, he's doing great at wrestling. But like he would tell me, he's like, dude, I just remember when I was young, I would hide in the washer and like just hide in there until my dad found me because I didn't want to go to wrestling practice. And then I just bawl my eyes out when he found me. And I'm like, how did you say with the sport? Like, I don't think
Yeah.
that's like where I am from. Um,
Look, he had success to
but
some degree.
I think that's a special kid. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think there's other aspects too. Like, I think a lot of it comes from like your parents or your role models when you're growing up. I remember like the reason I got into lifting weights, I'd see my dad go to the gym and I'm like, hey
100%.
dad,
Me too.
dad, can I
Yeah.
come with you? And he's like, yeah. And he bought me a gym pass. And to his credit, I probably like his workouts probably sucked from that day on because he would work out with me, and I was 11 and a half, 12 years old. And I mean, I'd wake up before school
Same
and we
thing
go at
happened.
6 a.m.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is cool. I get to be like my dad. I get to like, I'm so like that lead by example. And like as a parent, being active and doing stuff, I think is such a cool way to inspire your kid too, without directly pushing, sports and physical fitness.
Yeah. And especially with sports and physical fitness, I do think, and I've seen this done improperly before, like if you're going to push your kid, like, yeah, do it through leading by example, stay in great physical shape yourself. Like Enoch talked about this in his pocket. Like he'll do the sprints with the guys.
Yeah. Lead
Like
from the
you
front.
asking your kid to go to 6 a.m. wrestling practices, or you want them to, go with them. Like at least be there. I'm not saying you have to wrestle the whole time, but like, so yeah, lead by example as you're getting your kids into sports. That's a huge one.
Dude, that's the craziest thing about wrestling. I'm sure there's one or two other sports that do it, but I don't really know of any other sports where your coaches are actually working out with you most of the time. I mean, there's some examples set, but like you don't have
Not
football
many.
coaches playing, against their linebackers. You don't have a football coach running the ball. Like they're sitting on the sideline with the whistle, and nothing wrong with that. There's coaches that make great athletes. It is funny the respect you get and the relationships you build with your coaches because they're like in the trenches with you every day doing the thing.
Yep, it's different. Wrestling's different in that way. Totally different. But kind of back to, I have a question for you on more like youth wrestling, and I'm
Yeah.
coaching club high school and youth wrestling. So are you now. What age do you think it's appropriate to start, if the kid wants to start pushing and, like really, because we have some really good young guys up here at the club, and I find myself wanting to push them, but at the same time, no, like questioning if it's the right thing.
Yeah. It's a good it's a good question. And I think it's tough when it's like not your kid because if you ever overdo it a little bit, which I'm not saying like you'd hurt a kid, but like I do think there's a little bit of tough love in sports where you're pushing kids to the brink, in a safe way. Uh, but you're not trying to like make them hate the sport at the same time. I think probably middle to late middle school is probably where you can start getting more serious. I don't know that. I think one of the best things you can do, and our frame of reference is wrestling, so I'm going to use that, but like put your kids in good rooms, like have them get beat up by a bunch of other partners. You don't need to necessarily take them all over the country right away. Um, but let them see, like if they're having some success, they have to get that, like feel like they're increasing, getting better, and then bring them to a new room where they're like, oh, I'm just a big fish in a small pond. There's levels to this. Um, and I don't know. I think later middle school is probably a good time because
Do you
I
think
mean,
you could
Max,
start like going to good clubs and learning good technique at like 9, 10? But that's all local. Compete
yeah,
locally. You're in that pond. Then
yeah.
you're like 13, 12, 13. You can start
I,
going
I,
out and finding the really tough.
I think most young kids, if you're 10, 11, 12, and your parents are driving you 3 hours a day for practices, you're going all over the country. Like, I just don't know that I've seen more kids burn out that way than I've seen be successful. So yeah, I think they got to be a little bit older, a little more mature where they're doing it for them. Um, and I remember, dude, I remember my dad asking me like, "Hey, do you want to do this tournament?" And it was never like, "Hey, you have this tournament coming up." He was like, "Do you want to run?" And if I ever said no, it was like, "You don't have that tournament." And I think I was a little too shy to say no sometimes, so I just kind of kept going. I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I'll do it,"
Yeah.
because I felt like a sissy if I didn't say yes, you know. But then and then I started to enjoy it. I'm like, "Oh, I'm like doing well here. Like this is fun."
It's fun. Yeah.
So I don't know. I think probably later middle school. What do you think?
I think that's right. I'm trying to like use some of the kids I coach now as a reference. Some of them are like really, and you can, it's like you said, it's kid by kid. Some are really tough and they're like looking for it to be pushed, and they're like 10 years old. Like, man, all right. But like, I try and still just focus on having fun. Those kind of kids to coach. So I'm not like riding them about doing it. I mean, they go through the same practice the middle schooler and high schoolers do.
Yeah.
That's like the nature of club wrestling, but that it's just like a different level of intensity. But I do think, yeah, you shouldn't like. I also know those same kids, the kids I'm thinking of. They also play football. They do other sports. I think they're serious about wrestling, but they're doing other things. So they're probably doing it at the right amount of intensity. I think probably could do local. Make sure you got good coaching, but good coaching who understands it's important to have fun. And then, yeah, and I'm also going by my own personal experience. Late middle school, early high school is like when you really buckle down and focus in. And your point, right? I was not wrestling at this point. I was just doing judo, but it was all local stuff. I was like undefeated. And all of a sudden I started competing nationally. I was like, oh, there's kids better than me right now. I got to like, it was like, I got to step up my training, but it was like my understanding
Yeah.
that I had to do that. And then my decision to do it.
Yeah. And I think that's like the freeing thing, because then when it sucks, you're not like, why did my parents put me in this? You're like, I chose to be here.
Exactly.
But it is a tough line. And I think, again, every kid's different, but dude, you go so far, especially in wrestling, just building that mental toughness. And there needs to be some of that eventually. But I think you start that too young. It breaks some kids. Because I had coaches, man, we were just like, it was like just try to survive through the practice. But I think that made me learn like your body can do a lot more than you think. And when it gets tough, you got to make that decision. And there was times where, you come out of a practice crying, but then you still want to go the next day. So it's like, it's a fine line. And I think that's the coolest part about coaching. Like, when to kick him in the butt, when to give him a hug, and saying the right things at the right time. There's like I realized this coaching college wrestling, man, like one of my athletes came up to me and he said something to me and he's like, yeah, man, it really helped me. And I don't even remember saying the thing. It was like a pre-match speech. And it's like, you never know what like nugget that somebody takes, and you have such a bigger impact because it's like clay when they're younger to like mold and shape their experience. So I think it's a big responsibility, and you got to like really take that seriously. And everyone makes mistakes, but like being thoughtful about it. And then they got to also know like you're going to ask a lot of them, but like you're also got their back and you're there to, care for them and help them too.
At Iron Summit, we are about getting everything we can out of our workouts and everyday lives. If you aren't wearing a pair of barefoot or wide toe box trainers, you are leaving gains on the table. The Sashi Athletics Ronin Ichi Minimalist Trainer is a perfect barefoot shoe. Not only does it perform like other major brands on the market, it is actually good looking. Even my wife says so. Get a pair today for 10% off with the code IronSummit10. Link is in the bio. Yeah. Yeah. It is a fine line. And the other fine line is you want to instill drive. And obviously everyone, no matter what you say, everyone competes in sports to win.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the inherent point of it.
Yep.
But there's also this fine line of like not being too focused like on the result. And that's what the way of the peaceful warrior is all about. And I think that's a very hard thing to instill in young kids. And I see it in the wrestlers I coach all the time. They become so focused on winning and losing. They actually, one, they impact their performance, which is like, that's a ironic and a catch-22, but it happens all the time. You get so focused on not losing that you wrestle or compete not to lose, and that leads to a decrease in performance, and it makes it not fun. Because then if your entire worth is based on your performance and you don't perform, guess what's not fun anymore?
Yeah.
Wrestling.
Yeah.
So you got to have this fine line of like, yeah, we're here to win, but we're also like, you buy it into the process. You got to enjoy wrestling, not just winning. And that's a hard thing to instill in kids because it's like it's a pretty complex framework of understanding for a 10-year-old kid.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such a weird thing too, because competition, I think, is such a good thing. Even if you don't end up winning the competition, like if you're around a bunch of really high level people and you're all competing for something, like everybody's going to elevate their games. And that's why the biggest businesses, like, it's super competitive and it's dog eat dog. And I think there's like you can go too far. There's an extreme there where like you're so worried about keeping your job or keeping your spot on the team that you don't actually like practice growth and have that long-term mindset of trying to do the right things, even if it's like short-term not good for you. And you don't want to foster an environment where people are like stabbing each other in the back, but like there's a healthy level of competition that rises everybody. And I think we've, like, as a society, have shied away from that a lot. And that's what I think sports teach you really well. Like, you compete hard.
Competition is good.
Yeah. Yeah.
But even that's a better, like, rather like I like competing is better than I want to win or like I need to win.
But
Like
everybody
you're
says
focusing
that.
on it's
It's
really
hard.
hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. And I almost in college, I tricked myself into this by saying, hey, the less I focus on results and more just like buying into the process, the more I'm going to win at the end
Yeah.
of the day. But like, forget about the winning for now.
Yeah.
But why did I really buy into that process? It was to win,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
at the end of the day,
Yeah.
which
No,
is, that's so hard to let go of like the results. I think like the more you do it, the better it is. And I mean, you hear Penn State, who is absolutely dominant in wrestling, they hammer this. They're about like being grateful for competing and buying into the process. And they win a lot.
yeah. I think they're really good at that. But I also think, they also recruit the best kids in the country. Like it's a little bit of a, chicken
It's
or egg
twofold.
situation, you know?
Yeah, that's what I mean. And then, yeah, but imagine applying this framework of thought, which I do think is effective. I've seen it at Lehigh, like the more you just focus on the coaches, and while I was there, and then even since then and you heard, we talked to Zach Ray about this, you focus on like kind of having fun, buying into
Yeah.
the process, trusting the coaches, let go of the results a little bit, be grateful. The more success you have, but trying to apply that like with college wrestlers is hard. Now, like
Yeah.
take that to a 10 or a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
I think it's like that consistency over intensity, though. And that's something I want to ask you, Max. I was actually thinking about this week. How do you think about patience? Because I think one of the biggest things in life is being able to distract yourself while you're in those years of doing the work to stack up that foundation to get good at the thing you're trying to get good at. Um, and I don't think that, like, when I look at my own life, I'm like, I'm not a very patient person. I always like think that the next thing needs to come quicker. But I also like locked into a sport for 20 years and was able to like, and I think a lot of that was environment, but I think getting good at anything in life is like being able to distract yourself well there's like the ups and downs as you're continuing to like go up in a linear line, even though it's not straight, um, and stay in the course when it's, kind of gets boring and mundane, because that's where you get really good at, drilling the fundamentals and getting good at what you need to get good at.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd like to hear kind of your perspective as well on how you do it. I think for me, it is because you have this long-term view, right? Like whether it's this, and this can apply to fitness as well, whether it's, hey, I want to win the state championship, or I want to be an All-American, or I want to have a certain physique. And then to your point, there's the work that it takes to get there. And a lot of times that work is not fun. It's repetitive. It's boring, or it requires sacrifice. You and I both, we probably did not have the same social lives in high school or college that most have, right? So like we gave up certain things, but like the way I found and find myself succeeding in that is trying to buy into the process and enjoying the little things. It's not even enjoying, but like doing the little things to the best of my ability, because I know the outcome. And I do think, because I bet you had success at a young age in wrestling, right? Yeah. That's what the feeling of achieving your goal, having those little successes along the way, then makes it easier to go and stack the little wins. Like we'll use diet, for example. You start to eat really clean, track your macros, not go out with your friends, and you start to see the results in the way you look. That becomes more rewarding and addicting than going out with your friends.
Yeah.
In wrestling, you're doing 2 a day's practice, you're drilling double legs 100 times a day, which is boring as hell. But you start winning wrestling matches, that feeling and knowing because you did that becomes more addictive than, going and letting yourself go over Christmas break or hanging out late with your friends the night before a hard practice. Like, and I think that's kind of the key to it all, is when you want to do the grind work more than you want to not, because of the results, that's when you kind of like get this flywheel spinning and it all starts happening.
Yeah. I think it's so true. I think that thing that I have found post, college and competing in wrestling, in sports, there's a lot more of a defined goal. In life, you got to kind of define your goals and make those milestones, because it's not like, hey, in March, you got this tournament. This is your yardstick. You're trying to reach this goal. Here's your North Star. Then in life, it's like, hey, what's your goal for this year? What's your 5-year goal? What's your 10-year goal? And I don't know, man. I think social media has made this even worse. Like the instant gratification of, dopamine hits and looking at everything now, and Amazon, the next day you order something this morning, it's here by this afternoon. Like, yeah. I caught somebody, we were just talking with a buddy, and he's like, dude, it took 3 days for this thing to come. Like, you bought something from around the world and it got you in 3 days. That is freaking amazing. And you're thinking that was long.
He needs to move up here to the mountains. 3 days is excellent.
It's great. But I think, it's with everything, right? Like we were talking about crypto before we started this. Like, people go into crypto because they're like, hey, I don't want to grind and work. And I'm not saying don't invest in crypto. Like, I think it's fun, right? And you might get lucky, and there's some legitimate use cases for some of it.
It's just wealth growth with no work.
It's like a lotto ticket, right? Like, you could put a couple $100 away a month and do that for 40 years, and you'll have a lot of money at the end of your life. But that's not sexy. That's not fun. And you're not looking in your account. You're like, just one day there's millions of dollars, and I'm like, oh, this is great. It's a slow build over time. And that's what fitness is like. It's being able to lock in with the boring stuff every day for long periods of time. That's what it's like for sports. That's what it's like for your career. That's what it's like for your relationship. Like, if you, come home in a good attitude and like say hi to your wife and ask her how her day was, your relationship's going to be a lot better than, if you're in a bad attitude every day. Like, little things stack up. And I think it's really being able to like stay the course when it's not fun to go drill a double leg 100 times. And so I don't know how to articulate that, or I don't even know what the best way to do that, but you got to find a way to like lock in on the boring stuff.
For sure. Another, a couple of things. One is, when you're in high school and college, there's a beautiful simplicity to it with sport, and like there's a set path. You go from high school and you go to college.
Yeah.
Like when I was in high school, my goal was to win a state championship and go to an academically prestigious institution.
Yeah.
That's simple, right?
Yeah.
Like in college, it was pretty simple. It was to become an All-American and get good grades. Then once you graduate, all of a sudden you're like, simplicity's gone, to your point. And so I've found having certain little goals helps. It's harder in the professional world because that is very dynamic and you can't always control. As a wrestler, you are very much in control of your own success. In the professional world, you're not. So that's harder. But what's kind of satisfied that itch for me is having personal goals outside of professional goals that I can work towards and achieve, whether it was a powerlifting competition or if I'll do like have a bodybuilding competition. I probably will always have to have something physical for me to chase to like scratch that itch and keep me sane. Because then at least I have like, and then when I do have that, I feel like I work better at my professional goals just because I'm like, it's a little bit like I was trying to become an All-American. I just got really good grades because I like how you do one thing is how you do anything. And so I that's how I trick myself into doing it.
I think it's a good point too, man. Like, you can't, you got to overweight a little bit to really have like good progress. Like you got to really invest into something, but you got to also like diversify a little bit where this isn't your only thing. Because then like when you fail at something, it feels like you failed as a person instead of like you failed in that realm where I feel like I find peace when it's like, hey, when this one thing's going wrong, it's like, oh, but I have this other thing in my life going well. I have this other thing. And that's why, like, I think like faith is good. That's why like investing in relationships is good. That's why investing in your health is good. That's why professionally, because like you just had a bad day at work, but then you just smoked a PR, or you just had a bad day in the gym, but then like you and your wife go out and connect and have a great dinner together or something. Like
Yeah,
there's other
100%.
parts. You go to you're having a crappy week and then you go to church, and so I think like that grounds you too a little bit because you gotta consistency over intensity, man. I do think taking rest days and taking mental breaks from stuff, you do work a lot better over the course of a long time than burning yourself and redlining it for a long period of time. So it's important to have a little bit of balance, even if it's not like
100%.
normal balance.
I think a great way, I, and I learned this in college. Don't let your identity get wrapped up in what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
That's
like that.
like, I in college realized, hey, I'm not just a wrestler. That's why, and actually, I had my freshman year, I got terrible grades because I was like, I'm a dumb jock. Like, legitimately. And then I realized, like, hey, I'm not just a wrestler. I got to get good grades. I want to have success later in life. I
Yeah.
need to learn this stuff. And if anything else, I'm just competitive as hell and I don't want to have some frat boy getting better grades than me. Like
When did you realize that? Was that like a
sophomore
conversation
year.
with your parents, or was that just you just
You know
clicked
what?
in your head?
It clicked a little bit. You know when it really clicked though is when my brother, who was 2 years younger than me, got to Lehigh as well. And then we started like, hey, what was your GPA? And I started
Yeah.
like wanting to, but
Hey,
that, I
man.
mean, it was just not to beat Axel, but it was like,
Yeah.
I want to get better grades than everyone. All of a sudden, it was like I was competitive with my teammates, with like, and I wanted to be on the dean's list. I wanted to have like one of the best GPAs in my class. Um, but it was also like I let go of just being a dumb wrestler. I was like,
Yeah.
no, I'm going to also be a great student. I'm not a wrestler. I'm a Lehigh student who wrestles.
Yeah.
And I think you could make that argument for anything, though. You should not let your identity be wrapped up in what you're doing, because then if you ever have a bad day at what you're doing, yeah, your self-worth is going to be impacted by that.
Yeah.
And that's a dangerous cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's so true. It's such like a great thing to say. But it's
Very hard
really
to do.
hard. Well, because you throw so many hours into something, you throw 10,000 hours into something, it's hard to be like, yeah, I don't really care about this. You know? And it's like a
Yeah, I'm not,
weird mental
yeah,
spot.
it is. I'm not saying don't care. And again, I think this is why wrestling is such a great sport. It will teach you so many things, but it will teach you whether you like it or not. Like sometimes you lose and it hurts and like if you do you let your identity get wrapped up in wrestling and then you lose? I mean, I'm sure you've been
Just
there.
got
It's
beat
like,
as a person, man.
yeah, it's not a good feeling. So you have like I was forced to let go, especially college wrestling. Like in high school, you don't lose much. Up until that point, I had not lost much
Yeah.
in my life. And then college wrestling, you start losing more. I probably lost a little more than you did, but I know you had you lost every once in a while.
I lost
Um,
for sure.
yeah. And if you like that makes up your entire identity, it's like, it's brutal. So you're forced to let go of it a little bit.
Yeah.
Like
No,
the
I think,
sun will rise the next day.
yeah.
Family's still going to love you. You know, you still got class the next day.
Yeah. I think honestly, tying this all back together, like that's kind of the role as a parent too. Like you support your kid in sports, but I think the biggest impact you can have on your kid is being able to ground them when stuff gets hard in the sport like that, right? Like you lose. And then like, I think one of the most refreshing things in my college career was my mom. My mom could care less how I did in wrestling. Like she wanted me to win because she cares about me. But like we had the same type of conversation no matter what. Like I could have lost the biggest match of my career and she'd be like, "Oh, how'd you sleep? Like, how are you doing? What's going on?" Like she doesn't care. She was like, "I care about you." And that was like such a cool, and I'm not saying my dad wasn't that way either, but it's just like, I just think that that's such a refreshing feeling from a parent where you're like, oh, they care about me. They don't care about like my love is dictated based on how you do at this sport, you know?
Yeah. That is a great, great lesson. Yeah. I think, no, I think like if there's probably one thing we can impress upon parents, especially of wrestlers, but anyone doing a sport, is do not treat your kid differently based on their success or lack thereof. One thing that I've seen that I think like is crazy is I've seen parents like offering financial reward to their kids for
Yeah.
winning, like like taking them on trips, saying you get this if you do like material things, and like that is just setting a very, very backward precedent. Like your job as a parent is to love, reward your kid, and treat them right no matter what they're doing in sport. Um, like like make it about their effort, not about the result. Hey, you're doing something. Try hard when you're doing it, but yeah, love them no matter what. And that was honestly, I think I've told you this before, but round of 12 senior year, last chance for me, right? Never an All-American before, literally the defining moment in my wrestling career. And the one thought going through my head was my family's going to love me either way.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
was
It's cool.
freeing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is cool. That is really cool. How did you, was it weird your senior year? I always felt like, my last year of college, I couldn't think about the future too much. Like I had a lot of teammates, a lot of buddies that are like, lining up jobs, figuring out next steps. And I'm like, it definitely was a different mindset where it's not like, hey man, you got another year after this. It was like, hey, I'll never wrestle folk style again. I'm kind of putting a lot of time into a skill that's just like not applicable for the rest of my life for this like one last tournament in March. And there's a deadline on it. Like there's a hard stop at this tunnel. And I don't know, I couldn't think about it too much, man, because it made me feel like I'm investing a lot into something that's like pointless in 2 months.
Sure. So my senior year was when I basically almost quit right before it. So I think I was like a little free of that. I was like, I'm just gonna give this one hard go. And then yeah, towards the end, like I started winning, like I was having a great season. Then I was like, okay, this is big now. Like now I'm seeded top 8 at nationals. Like so I think, but I had it like it was very compressed. It was like into the second half of the season. But yeah, I did not focus on much else. It was all consuming for sure. And my second semester senior year, you don't have to have 12 credits as long as you're advancing towards
Yes.
a degree. So
Yeah.
I had 4 credits. I was literally just wrestling.
Yeah.
That's what I was doing my senior
Which
year.
which is funny because like you could get overweight in wrestling, like
For
in
sure.
sense of like thinking too much about it, being too much like putting it in your identity. But it sounds like you learned those lessons before that, so it was easier to,
Yeah.
I don't know,
I was
spend the
doing
time you needed.
constant work at that point to like working with a sports psychologist, trying to stay grounded, trying not to become like, hey, this is going to define you, All American or not. Like I was really trying to have none of those thoughts and just focus on like what I did do is I buried myself in the little work. Like I
Yeah,
nailed my meal plans. I tried as hard as I could in the one class I had left. I got like, 8 hours of sleep. I was on a strict sleep schedule.
yeah.
Like I just buried myself in like the little stuff. So I couldn't even focus on the big tournament at the end of the year.
I think it's a good way to beat. Like you focus on the battles, and then you'll win the war. Um,
Bingo.
but you, sorry, we're getting a little long winded here. But
No, it's all good.
one last thing. What about knowing what you know now and the amount of work that's stacked up into that? Would you like do it again?
What do you think? I want to hear you first.
Dude, I like right after I won nationals, my one of my teammates was like, "Congrats, man. Was it worth it?" And I'm like, what?
Whoa.
I was like, yeah. Like, but then it like messed me up for a couple of days. I was like, I don't know. Was that like a worthy thing? And like because it worked out, I think it's easy for me to be like, yeah, that was worth it. But I also think if I restarted now to like 8 years old, knowing what I know now, like looking up that mountain and knowing the mountain that I have to climb, I'm like, I don't know if I do it. And I don't know that that's like a fair comparison because you're looking down from a stack of work
Yeah,
where
yeah.
when you're in the day to day, it's like it's easy to put one foot in front of the other and slowly stack all this stuff. And I think ultimately, like the lessons and everything, like I wouldn't change a
That's
thing.
it.
But when you look at it as a whole, that's like a overwhelmingly like hard to digest thing where when you're in it and you just stack little wins at a time, it's bite sized. It's easy to keep showing up for that. Um, but if you knew how much work it took when you started, I don't know if I'd do it again. Like if somebody stacks this in
Yeah.
front of you and it's like, here, this is what you're gonna have to do. It's like, that's a lot, man. Like
Yeah.
as weird as that sounds,
No,
I
I
don't know.
know what you're saying. Well, I think there's two. One, the important lesson is to like focus on the little, control the little what things, control what you can, put your effort into that. Because yeah, it's like if you get focused on that long term goal, it's gonna, yeah, it's a tall mountain to climb. And for myself, I do think like I wouldn't change how I did it. I do think, and like that feeling of becoming an All American was unbelievable. Like that was like my pinnacle moment. It was like years of hard work coming to true and like a dream coming true. That being said, if I had lost that match, it'd be a whole different story. And like for me, it was one match my entire time. I mean, maybe you could say the same about your national championship match. It was that one match. But I think if I had lost that match, I still had the experiences and the lessons and like to like why even get your kids started in sports and wrestling in particular in the first place. It's because of those life lessons you're going to learn. So I think I'd do it all over again just for that. Like there are very few arenas to truly test yourself as an individual, learn how to push yourself, learn how to lose. That's 100% on you. Um, there's not a lot out there now in the world we live in. It's a very cush world, full of instant gratification. Wrestling will teach you, whether you like it or not, how to be humble, how to take a loss, how to work for a longer term goal. There's definitely no instant gratification in wrestling. So I would, for that reason, I would do it all over again, and I'll probably have my kids at least try wrestling. I don't know if you saw Jocko Willink, though, posted
That
the
was
other day a
sweet.
picture
Yeah.
of his daughter saying, put your kids in wrestling, it'll help them in life, something like that. And I think for that reason, yes, I would do it all over again.
No, I think it's smart. But I think that like when I was asked that like instantly, like when I was just
That's like
supposed
heavy duty.
dude,
Which
but
teammate was this? Come on.
Dude, it was
Let him
Chris
enjoy
Can.
his
It
lips
was
for a
it,
minute.
it, it was Chris Cannon.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know what he was asking at first. And then I thought about it. I'm like, what? But I do think you're right. I think when I got asked that, like it made me think, this wasn't the point. Like the point wasn't to win. Like you always want to win. That's cool. Uh, but it's like who you become along the way and the journey of that. Uh, and like one of the coolest things I think about like college, like we are talking about, it's so simple, but you're like aligning everything in your life towards a goal. Uh, but that's what also like really hurts when you when you fall short and you can do everything right. And it's not guaranteed that you're going to accomplish what you want to accomplish. So I think there's like a huge lesson in that too, where it's like you don't give yourself a chance if you don't go all in on this, but you also could go all in and still get burned really bad.
No. And yeah, that no, it's 100% true. I do think also I had this in it was always this way. High school, certainly college. I didn't want to be like everyone else or want to like the things I was giving up. I was like okay giving up the social aspects. I wanted to have like I wanted to just be a little different. I don't know if you had that as well because like when it's like was it worth it? It's like the things I was giving up I probably don't want to do as a person anyway,
Yeah.
which makes it easier. I mean, still like really hard work, but I enjoyed differentiating myself in that way.
Yeah.
Like there's a little bit of selfish incentive, like, okay, all you wussies, like I this is how I live. Like it's a little like a selfish incentive there as well. Like it's not like I was just altruistically like always doing all this hard work. Like
But I
there's a
think
little bit of ability to like look at it as like I'm doing something extraordinary.
the
I'm trying
environment
to.
you grew up in or the way like from a young age, somehow that became instilled in you that like, I don't care about like this partying aspect. I don't care about having this normal social life. I don't care about this stuff. And you found something else to be more intriguing. And I think I mean, that's a good point too. Like I think you're going to only invest the time in it the way you need to if you find that is more important to you than all these other things because and that's any sport, man. If you want to be an elite athlete, you're not going to look like 99% of your friends because you're going to have to live a different lifestyle to reach your goals in those sports. Um, but I don't know how you pinpoint like what made you decide that stuff was worth it more for you than what your buddies are doing. That's, art like objectively fun, but you can't do it to the same degree that they're doing if you want to accomplish what you want to accomplish.
Well, I think, and you and I have like, I'm curious to get your take. I know we're coming close to wrapping up here, but growing up in Colorado's like pretty, uh, like a lot of stoners, a lot of like just hanging out, skiing, snowboarding. That was like most of my friends in high school. And I had this like, I just still remember to this day, and I don't know where it started, but I just like wanted to be different. I was like, I'm not going to be the normal Boulder kid. Like, and it's just like, it started from there and it
Yeah.
like kept growing. And I don't know if you had a similar experience being in Colorado. Like, it was fun being, people are like, you don't smoke weed? I was like, no. Like, I wrestle, man. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know. It was just like kind of fun to take that different path and be unique. And I do think like also like coaches and teachers start recognizing you for that. So it reinforces like a positive association with being different. And then it probably grew from there.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, man. Um, I don't know if I ever thought about it like that. I just think like I generally did pretty like I definitely probably sucked at sports when I started, but like I feel like I started seeing success fairly early on. And so that was kind of reinforcing too, where it's like if you're good at something, it's enjoyable, as bad as that sounds. Um, and so I was for some reason I had fun with sports. That's where my friends were. I was going from sport to sport. I think my parents like introduced me to every sport. I was playing soccer at 4. I was playing lacrosse, football, baseball, basketball, wrestling. Like it was just what I was doing for fun. Like that was my hobbies. And so then I think I'm hardwired where I'm competitive. And so when I saw a path to like doing better at this thing that I'm somehow putting some value on, I was like, I need to keep pulling that thread and then slowly learning that stuff. So yeah, I don't know, man. I really don't know. But I do think there's like that, we work well with that small like dopamine hits that you get from something. And that's why you need little rewards along the way to like be like, oh, I'm making progress at this. And it encourages you to continue to go. You know?
Yep. Yeah, you need that positive reinforcement. And yeah, but the only way to really get there is to do the work. In the meantime, you can't really get it without it, and we talk about this all the time. That's the secret sauce, is doing the hard work, no matter
Yeah,
what you're doing in life.
stack those hours.
Yep.
I love it.
So,
Awesome.
wrap it up.